Well, hello, everybody. Happy Monday. Welcome to Aquarius Rising Africa, where we've been having, or I've been having fun and games in this little studio shanty with my camera suddenly starting to play up. So if I disappear, please don't worry. I will reappear again. Welcome, everybody. So good to see you, to everybody in our chat. Lovely to see you here. And of course, Brice on a Monday. We're 2 hours earlier today. And then, of course, back with us is RockerMike. How are you, RockerMike? Are you happy to be back with us girls again?
Oh, absolutely. Thank you for having me on again.
So happy to have you on. You're the Aquarian chicks, so you're in good company.
All right, cool.
Hello, Brice. How are you?
You know, we were having with part one that we did. We had problems with your internet then too. It's like somebody somewhere is trying to get Chantelle on these shows.
I'm like, I know. I so know it. I mean, it's crazy.
The devil will make for bad, God will use for good. And I think that, as we've said before, this topic we're going to talk about, we could do like 20 shows on this topic because there's just so much to it. And so, you know what? We'll laugh at the dark ones because what you make for bad, God uses for good. So here we are, cross-pollinating the channels, talking about this, to me, hysterical topic. I don't know why it makes me laugh. This topic makes me laugh. I think it's just the idea of grown-ass adults running around New York City in the 70s casting spells on each other. Something about it just makes me like,
well, exactly. It's so ridiculous, but yet they think it's so powerful. And that's, unfortunately, a lot have succumbed to it, haven't they? Because otherwise we wouldn't really be sitting in the position that we are right now. Because, you know, with all these witchy things going on, like, okay.
Well, it may not seem relevant to now, but it actually is.
It's very. Before we go on, though, should we say, you guys, if you like this stuff, if you like the conversations about the occult and like untold history and hidden stories, there is a panel that's going on with Gnostic TV. Mike is part of this panel. Shanti and I are hosting a few of the interviews. Where we're going to be talking about a lot of the survivors of this club of people, these covens. And of course, Mike is a heavy researcher into this stuff. And Mike was the one that recommended this book to me where we learned about the witch wars of I learned about the witch wars of the 1970s. And so just before we get into it, guys, keep your eyes peeled because there's going to be a huge panel over on Gnostic where we're not censored. So we can really talk the nitty gritty about.
When is that coming up? I know there's been a delay with that.
We're looking at going to probably be airing on the weekend of the 28th and 29th of September. Okay. Either both days or one day. Yeah. Sorry?
I thought it was going to be out about a month ago, but there was some delays.
No, yeah. Yeah, we originally intended having it earlier, but as wheel turns, it turned to the end of September. So, we're having a lot of, it's called Tales of Survival from the Dark Side. So, of course, a lot of some of our guests here as well will be over there. Gnostic is a uncensored channel. So we will be talking about lots of uncensored things. So, yes, watch this space. And we would love to see you supporting our viewers. And it's the first time that actually that Gnostic has something like the SRA and stuff on it. So we're actually introducing the SRA to that platform.
Also, if I could just do a shameless plug for myself for a second.
Go ahead. Yes.
Me and Rob just joined up with Gnostic recently, and we recorded now 2 shows that are going to be up over the next couple of days or maybe week. That are going to be free. They're going to be not behind the paywall. So everybody that can, if you're a Gnostic viewer or not, be able to see it. And it's all about the new shooting that was attached to the Son of Sam case. Okay, so we kind of got dragged back into this again with the new Truth Behind the Crime series that we have on Gnostic. I wasn't going to bring up Son of Sam, at least for a while, but because of the recent events in the last 2 months with it, we need to be out there and show that this shooting was not done by David Berkowitz, the son of Sam.
Well,
Right.
that's a really good intro, you guys, and for what we're going to talk about. Because Mike, you kind of you got deep into the Son of Sam escapade. We'll say illusion, because I think like most people think that even though David Berkowitz was guilty of some of the shootings, this was a really big cover up of like some occultism and some covens and some really crazy, you know, we've got implications and speculation of Hollywood producers being involved, you know, and so this kind of, and this is how you found this book, correct? In your research?
Yeah. We, you know, when I started doing it with Rob over 3 years ago, we teamed up with Carl Denaro, who's a survivor. He was shot by a son of Sam shooter. I don't believe it to be Berkowitz. He doesn't believe it to be Berkowitz. In fact, Carl wrote a book about that. Okay, how he doesn't believe it was David Berkowitz that shot him. And our research, one guy we teamed up with, Chris Jr., who was on a show with you, Brice, with me, and he found that Dead Names book and brought it to my attention. And what I liked about it was we were always going off of the Maury Terry research. Who wrote The Ultimate Evil. I know you got that book handy.
I'm going to pull it out.
Yeah. And you know, that's the Bible really for the whole conspiracy angle of it. Right. And this was another author that was talking about similar things, at least briefly in the book. So I enjoyed reading that book, and it opened my eyes to a few things I really didn't know. Okay. And you like the whole witch wars thing that is mentioned in that book, and it's all based around.
Question for you, Mike.
Yeah, Mike. There's quite a conversation about you.
Please don't say I have a New Jersey accent. That's a total insult. I'm from New York. Okay, I was born in Brooklyn and lived in Brooklyn and Queens most of my life. So please, not New Jersey. But yeah, maybe I sound like Tony Soprano. I don't know, whatever.
But that's what makes your eye on this case, though, Mike, so special, is because you were a kid when Son of Sam was going on. You actually you know where these locations are, and it makes it different when you're from, you know, you can research certain stories, but when you're from an area, there's a level of understanding that someone outside of that area is not going to have. And because you are a New Yorker, born and bred, when it comes to like Son of Sam, and especially when it comes to, because there was something in the letters, they talked about the tunnels, didn't they? But they called it something else, and I can't remember exactly what it was. But as someone from Georgia, when I read the letters, I didn't pick up on the tunnel system. But
well, I think what you're referring to is in the letters that were written to either journalist Jimmy Breslin or to the police.
Yeah,
he mentioned the gutters of New York City.
Yeah.
What that meant was in Yonkers, where he lived, David Berkowitz lived, and where this cult was active in Untermeyer Park. Okay. There is a no longer used system of tunnels that was part of the Croton Dam system that brought from a Croton Reservoir, I believe it's called, brought the water down into New York City. There's a newer system. The old system runs through Untermeyer Park. So the gutters and stuff is a reference to that, it's believed.
Yeah, and I wouldn't have known that. And I think that's another angle that's super important for not just the Son of Sam story, but what we're going to talk about with Dead Names as well, which there is connections to the Son of Sam. Because as someone from Georgia reading that letter, when I see the gutters of New York, I think about like just the gutter, like the side of, where if you live in a city where like the trash gets swept.
Yeah. No, we actually we did a couple of shows in the Son of Sam Chronicles, which you can still see on YouTube. We did a couple of shows on like dissecting these letters, and there was a lot. Well, we had a great guest on that had an English major, and she got into the whole like the way these letters were written. There was so many like double entendres and so many they call it alliteration in literature, other things. I mean, it was even a little over my head because I'm not an English lit major, but she explained these things that, whoever wrote this had some kind of like super education in English lit. And that was not Berkowitz, of course. Okay, so we don't really know who wrote these letters. It's possible he penned them. You know, he could have wrote them, but did not come up with it all. Okay, he just didn't have that kind of background. There's too many coincidences in it where there's a lot of double entendres and different meanings that only people in poetry and stuff like that, people into that, would be able to pick up on it. The gutters of New York City, that reference, it's like I said with the Yonkers, the Croton system. Okay, that it's a tunnel that runs under and kind of adjacent to Untermeyer Park that you could access. Okay, at the time, there was a place called the Devil's Gate, which was in Untermeyer Park, and it was a pump house, and you could go in it, and you would be in this tunnel system that took you upstate or down towards the Bronx. And people would go in this thing. I imagine people even lived in there. Who knows? Okay. But the Devil's Gate was where some of these ceremonies were done. You know, how much David Berkowitz was involved with that, we don't know. Okay. But we do know that he was seen in Untermeyer Park. He was, you know, he's mentioned it, you know, and some of it could have been related to that. We also know he was involved in some bigger stuff, okay, cult-wise, stuff based in New York City, but we don't know exactly. We just know that there was.
And you're right, because the big Maury Terry was the big one that was like, this is not what the Son of Sam was not what the NYPD said it was. But then you look in Dead Names, and so we have this big guy, Maury Terry, that's going around, and people think he's the one that's saying this is occult stuff, this is satanic, this is not just some random serial killer, this is deeper. But then we've also got it mentioned here as well by someone completely different.
And that's why I was very impressed with that book, because the detractors of this, the people that believe that Berkowitz worked alone and Maury Terry, you know, was a liar or whatever, you know, there's detractors out there. Now I got another book saying the same thing. Okay. So I felt it was pretty powerful we had done some shows on it, and you picked up on it too.
Yeah, it's well, and that brings us to like the Magical Child Shop, which, I mean, you guys, like, I was born in 1983, so I was not around in the 70s. But when I think of these characters in this Magical Child Shop, and especially Herman Slater, and I know that there are allegedly some speculation that he might have liked younger people, we'll say, with censorship, but there's all these eccentric characters that are revolving around this like mystical shop. And I think every city, we have it, the Phoenix and the Dragon, we have it here in Atlanta. And for most of the shop is pretty harmless. It's just like tarot cards and crystals and stuff, but you have these back rooms, like we have them at the Phoenix and the Dragon as well. And when you get into the occult world, there was kind of this underbelly of this ecosystem of these different covens kind of battling it out that revolved around this store. And I'm going to read from chapter 4 of this book called The Children. And it says, in an editorial in the Earth Religion News, a periodical published by Herman Slater at the Warlock Shop, which was his original store, Volume 1, number 4, 1974, it is declared that the War of the Witches is over. By that time, everyone had stopped fighting with each other and denouncing one another as heretics, and gotten down to more serious building covens and occult networks across the country. These networks included some of the leading lights of neo-paganism, numbering Church of All Worlds, the Pagan Way, and the Church of the Eternal Source. Now I'm going to skip down because he says the groups that were not a part of the witch wars were actually the most worrisome to us at the time. These included the Church of Satan, the Church of Scientology, and the Progressive Church, the Process Church of the Final Judgment.
Yeah.
So,
it actually goes back to the Warlock Shop. Okay, Magical Child was in Manhattan. The Warlock Shop was the same owner, Herman Slater, a couple years prior in the Brooklyn Heights neighborhood. Okay, in Brooklyn, and I guess you could say the witch wars started during that time. And you're right. The one what's said there is exactly correct. The church, the Church of Satan, the Process Church, one or two others were really the more worrisome ones. Mm-hmm. It was all these kind of like, little underlings that were fighting amongst themselves for power, including like a new kind of religion like Wiccan. Okay, was started to make its appearance in that time. It's all in all.
What are the origins of that? I'm interested to know. If you say it started making its appearance at that time.
Well, I believe Wiccan. It comes out of a neo-paganism type thing. Okay,
right.
Where if you look at people that call themselves Wiccan, I've known quite a few. Okay, they're into crystals, the new agey tarot cards at the most, that kind of stuff. They might call themselves a witch. They worship Mother Earth,
trinkets and toys.
kind of. Okay, and now there's something to that, I guess. I've known people that have done tarot cards, and pretty much freaked me out a little bit with them. You know what I mean? But and actually, my experience with the magical child is my ex-wife used to do tarot, and she would go there to get tarot cards when she needed or candles or things like that. Now I met her there a couple of times. This was in the very early 90s, and I would meet her after work or whatever, at the time. And when you went in that place, it seemed pretty harmless. It was just like you say, like the Phoenix and the Dragon, like the candles and crystals and books and things up front. Okay, but there was a room in the back that was noticeable. It was behind a black curtain, and you'd see people come in and go back there, and it's like, what's back there? Oh, well, don't worry about it. They wouldn't even tell you, and but people that call themselves Wiccans, they would argue with other people that were calling themselves witches and warlocks. Some people were into Aleister Crowley, sex magic. There was a whole thing with that. So these factions, they really weren't all that powerful. Okay, well,
they're kind of pipsqueaks. They're little pipsqueaks running around.
Yeah, we're kind of fighting amongst themselves for a couple of years, and he called it the Witch Wars.
Interesting what you were saying though about the crystal shops and things, and having the back door, because the more I've dealt with a lot of the SRA survivors over the past few years, and they will often say that very often these like crystal shops that you go and you buy your incense and your crystals and your cards and your little fairy wings and what have you.
Mm-hmm.
In the back, you get to order your body parts and your stuff for the.
Well, they could be, some might act as fronts for other things, and there's degrees of that as to how much they are involved. In Dead Names, a big part of the book is about getting a hold of ancient manuscripts, okay,
right.
which is something that people did for profit, okay, but also what's discovered in a stolen batch of manuscripts is the Necronomicon.
Yep.
Yes.
The Necronomicon was something that nobody really believed existed. They thought it was, some people did, I guess, but they believed it was in the imagination of H.P. Lovecraft, who wrote about it in the 1920s in his books. But the person who wrote the book under the pseudonym Simon found this book with some stolen manuscripts and attempted to translate it. And he worked at the Magical Child.
Yeah.
Okay, and he translated it. Now, Herman Slater, when he saw the manuscript, and that Simon said, "Well, it's the Necronomicon," his mouth dropped open, like, "What? You can't have that. That's not real." But as they got into translating it, they realized what they had, and it was an ancient text in ancient Sumerian, and other parts of it that just couldn't even be translated. What kind of language it was, they don't know of everything in it. But it was a book of the dead. It was a book of spells and things like that. To me, it's something not to mess with. Okay, they've translated it. You could buy it. Okay, it's been satired in. People they've tried to I don't know if it's intentional, but some things play it down. Like, you've ever seen the movie Evil Dead? Okay, he finds the Necronomicon in a little cabin in the woods, and he starts speaking from it, and all these demons appear and everything like that. It's in movies like that kind of make people go, "Oh, it's just a joke. It's not real." But then, then when you mess around with it, you open a portal.
That's very real.
Very
real.
Well, and I had somebody comment, because I've covered the Necronomicon before, because it's considered to be like the world's most evil book, and allegedly the original Necronomicon was covered with the skin of human beings. The original.
Well, that's played up too in Evil Dead. Like it's done like in the cover of the skin of people.
Yeah,
which is the one that's in donkey skin, though? Isn't there another one that's written on donkey skin?
Pig skin, maybe.
The Devil's Bible with a mag. I've covered it years ago. I covered it. I'll have to go look. I think I know the one you're talking about, Shanti, which is considered the Devil's Bible. Well, the Necronomicon, I mean, it's a spell book. It's a grimoire. And one thing I appreciate, I've said this before about Simon, or if it was Peter Levenda, I've listened to a lot of Peter Levenda's stuff now. And, everything, darkness can't create anything, only the light can create. So what the darkness does is it takes the light and it inverts it. And Peter Levenda, as well as Simon, are both very, very clear. Peter in his lectures on YouTube, and Simon in this book, about getting into things like anything that involves blood ritual, you should not be doing. And they explain that there are lines you cannot cross. But the problem is, a lot of people using these books are using them for nefarious, selfish, service to self purposes. And so they get involved in this dark stuff where they're doing blood rituals, where they're doing dark shit with this stuff, and it's dangerous. And in one of the lectures that quote unquote Simon gave, it's a very old lecture. I think I tagged it in one of my videos on my, he talks about, like, if you're going to be summoning something, you got to know what you're summoning. And you got to, if you have to give like an offering to anything, it should just be like bread. Like, it never should be something that requires the life force of another living being. And so I respect that about Simon and Peter Levenda, that they're able to talk about this world, but also put boundaries up and say, you don't want to get involved. And there's one scene where some famous person asked him to come and like summon a demon for them, because obviously he knows how to do it because he's very well versed, and he flat out refuses. He's like, absolutely not. I'm not going to be summoning a demon for you.
And just to bring it back to the Son of Sam for a second, is David Berkowitz has said that he has been in the presence of a demon that was summoned up. Okay, when he was hanging out with certain people that were in this cult, okay, around the Son of Sam, okay, and the shootings and murders. He was messing around with something he shouldn't have messed around with. In Dead Names, it's mentioned that he was introduced to certain people in Pelham Bay Park, which is in the eastern part of the Bronx, totally the opposite end of the area from where Yonkers is. And those people told him, get a satanic Bible. He went down to the Magical Child. He did that. And then he started hanging out with them in Pelham Bay Park, where there were rituals going on. And also, he eventually, to be closer to these people, move over to Yonkers and set up shop there and be involved with stuff in Untermeyer Park to some degree, okay, and other things. So, he saw a demon conjured up. He did say that.
I believe it.
The whole thing with the dark side, though, is that you have to give permission. If we look at everything that is happening, they believe that as long as they're telling us what they're doing, then they don't have the karma, right? Which is why they create their secret language of symbolism, which is what, if you look at Jesse's shows and just the way the buildings are structured and the churches, etc., that's like learning Chinese, We have to learn their language, and we must never forget that. So everything is around us all the time. They're actually telling us all the time what they're doing. But in order for us to participate in that world, we have to give permission. In other words, we have to open the door for that to enter. And oftentimes that's done through bloodlines. Like when you're looking at these high bloodline Luciferian families, those are bloodline curses, as they're called. So you automatically connected with certain demons even before birth, right? Which is where the SRA comes in. So SRA is done so that you can connect to those specific demonic entities. So, and also when you're hearing, I mean, if you guys watching Caleb Jade stuff, who was a mage, he was a mage in the system, right? He will tell you all the time things that these guys used to do in churches, etc. How they find the root in, right? How they find the root in. So if you open the door and you start playing, for example, with Ouija boards, or you start unknowingly entertaining trickster energies. Now, trickster energies can be working either way, and boom, before you know it, there it is. So I think me personally, I have no problem looking at that stuff or observing it, because I know I'm protected from it. Yeah. It doesn't, I know.
Right. Well, you're not giving the permission you're talking about. Okay. And exactly. I believe that when you do these things, you open portals, and you don't know what. Okay. Now, depending on your state of mind, depending on what's going on in your life, your weaknesses, these demons, when they size you up in about a second, okay? And they know your weaknesses, okay? And they can latch on to that, and then you have a problem.
Absolutely.
Okay? People get into these things for different reasons. Sometimes it's just like, oh, it's no big deal. You always have that one friend, oh, it's no big deal. It's just fun. Yeah, it's not. It's, you're opening doors to things.
And it's only, it's like anything. It's tempting in the beginning. They're going to sugarcoat that thing with the nicest icing sugar until you cut through that shitty cake, like literally. So it's going to look all good and seductive in the beginning, because that's obviously the power of seduction. And if you yourself are still open to greed, in other words, if you have fear of not having, so that is then translated into greed in your life, those guys will know. They will sniff you out like a bloodhound, and they will tempt you with every possible thing that they can. And, this is the whole thing that I see. So up until such time that we say, actually, F off, I really don't need your crap. I'm completely aligned with my light or source or God or my creator, whatever the case might be, then those doors are no longer open. So I think they've really banked on us being so dumbed down, because that's really what the situation is. They've dumbed us down for many, many decades now. And so of course, the more disconnected we are from our consciousness, the more they can play with us. So really, that's all it is,
People don't have God in their life anymore like they did 100 years ago, or, whatever. So because everything now is man-centered, we basically live in a, people will say, oh, well, the United States is a Christian country. Not really, not anymore. Okay. Christianity is crapped on in the United States now.
It's been used as a diversion. It's been used as the biggest tool of manipulation. You ask any SRA survivor, they've all been through churches, in the dungeons, on slabs somewhere underneath, usually a Catholic or a Mormon church.
Well, it's what crazy. I'm saying, I get you, but what I'm saying is people aren't even aware of what they're actually doing, because they don't have that religious training, in a sense, of what is bad. Okay. If you are 100 years ago, if you were a devout Catholic, for instance, chances are you're probably not going to get involved in something like this. It would be a lot for you to get involved in something like this. Now, because that is taken out of society, people don't understand the dark. They think, oh, it's just another religion or it's equal to other things. It's not, it's not.
But it's also how it's been, and I think the problem here is how it's been manipulated, because there's been so much that's been kept away from us, as I'm discovering with every flippin' person I interview.
Yeah,
everything has been so distorted. If you speak to guys that have been in the arcane or literally in the cult for many years, they know the proper Bible inside out, back to front, upside down.
You know why that is? Do you know? I don't mean to cut you off, but you know why that is? Okay.
Yeah, because they're keeping that information. That's how they dumb us down.
There's another reason. That's true, but there's another reason. Okay.
Yeah.
The dark, demons, people, creatures like that. Okay. They know the Bible better than anybody. All right. They have to follow the natural order of things. If there's a guy I follow named Father Ripperger. Okay. And he is an exorcist. Okay, and he speaks often on YouTube. Yeah, I think he has his own channel, or he gets interviewed on other channels. And he'll talk about how, demons have to follow the natural order of the world. They know that God is in charge, and there's nothing they can do about that. Nothing. Okay, I believe that kind of mentality, if you want to call it that, or that belief of the natural order, follows into people that get into that as well. Okay, so you'll have people that are in the dark. Okay, they're doing these things. Okay, it could be a Luciferian family like you mentioned. Okay, but even they have to follow certain rules because they know what's up.
Which is why they're always talking to us in symbolism, a language we don't understand. So they will invite us. So just by buying a ticket for a Taylor Swift concert, you've given permission. So when you look at her concerts and the rituals they're doing there, you've given permission. Yeah. And that's the stuff that we don't know, or we didn't know.
Oh,
so the more we actually realize it,
they're going to try to trick you. But if you're savvy in that stuff, you won't fall for it. That's what I'm trying to say.
And that's amazing, because I think this is why it's so important we have these conversations, because, it's amazing for me on this channel, 4 years. It shocks me that people don't even know the stuff that I forgot 3 years ago. Yeah. And especially in South Africa, we live in such a clouded world here. America, I know that a lot of crap happens in America. That's why I talk to you guys, because it's happening there, it's happening here. I'm going to help cut the head off the snake. I'm going to cut that head off the snake in America, boy, because if that head is off there, the snake's leg here goes paralyzed. I tell you what, the Rothschilds own this country, and it's all done in exactly the stuff we're talking about here.
We have a question from Kimberly that's interesting, and I think I know the answer, but she says, fascinating, was Berkowitz a Mason? Why pick him? I don't think he was a Freemason.
He was not a Freemason. No, not at all.
And I've just learned something interesting. My mind has been a little bit changed by the Freemasons, because I've just learned myself that not every single Freemasonic lodge is associated with anyway, that's a story for a different day. I'm still skeptical of the Freemasons, but now I know not to judge every single lodge, because there are some that are not associated. Anyway,
there's levels of it, Brice.
Yeah. Oh, I know.
Right?
I know.
So, the ones on the bottom that are just hanging out at the lodge don't really know what's going on the top.
They don't.
Yeah.
They're like the front guys. Those are the front guys. They keep the cover. Those are the guys that have got the Lions clubs and all these things.
Stuff is dangerous stuff.
They're doing the community service, making it. But why they picked Berkowitz? My opinion is Berkowitz was just an easy fall guy. That's kind of my opinion.
I can give a little deeper explanation with that. Okay, Berkowitz was the kind of guy that he wanted to be accepted. He had that personality. He's not he's depicted as the nerdy guy that can't get a girl, and he wasn't like that. He had girlfriends, and he used to go to parties, and he was somewhat social, nothing really too far out of the ordinary. But he also wanted to be accepted, and I don't think he was picked. I think he kind of fell into it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. I could be wrong. I've never, do these people pick you? Do they search you out? I don't, I never saw evidence of that. He seemed to just get involved with this because when he joined the Army, I think it was 1971, he joined in all rah-rah. He wanted to go to Vietnam, but he ended up in Korea, okay, just stationed at the DMZ. And he got involved with drugs. He was taking acid, which, that could scramble your brains, okay? And doing drugs and getting into trouble. And, he had a troublesome childhood anyway before that, okay? But what he got into also in the Army was Christianity, okay? He was raised Jewish, okay? And he got into a born-again kind of Christianity, and when he got back, or even when he was sending letters home, he was talking about Jesus. And by the time he got home, he kind of ostracized all his friends. They didn't want to deal with him because he came back like a Jesus freak. That's the way they described him. And I think he realized, and his family was upset about it. Okay. And I think it didn't work for him. It didn't take, okay. He really didn't, it didn't hold for him. So by the time he got involved with what was going on in the Bronx and in Yonkers, 75, 76, he was looking for something.
Yeah.
And that's what happened to him.
He was like they call him a pick me, like a pick me girl or pick me boy. He was like a pick me, like pick me. And he was just desperately looking for a place.
An attention seeker for sure. And that's why, and it's true what you say, Mike. When you're looking at the hierarchy bloodlines, those kids are chosen even before they're born because those entities are part of their bloodline. But when it comes to the sort of street level, street Satanism type thing, there's no real structure in terms of that. But the hierarchy certainly depends on what they call the expendables, right? Not just expendable kids, but just the general trinkets, and they call it, I don't know, Caleb's got a name for it, trinkets and something, which is like you'll talk about the real mages, the real warlocks, the real witches. They don't, for example, wear black hats and goth nail polish and stuff. They look completely. They are so in the background. Yeah. You don't hear about them. You don't
pay attention to what they're doing.
Yeah, and again, they use the trinkets and treasures as covers. It's like that's the diversion for the real stuff. That's
one thing in the Dead Names book is Simon says that people in the magical child, people going in and out of there regularly, okay, knew that there were other people involved in the Son of Sam story, shootings and stuff. It could just been okay. They knew this. Now we're talking 76, okay, and going into 77. He would be arrested in August of 77. So for a year, New York City was terrorized, which I remember as a kid. Okay. It was probably the first time I ever saw adults really afraid, which as an 8-year-old kid was kind of, messed up to see that. Okay. But, they knew this. Okay. So people in the community knew what was going on, and no one said anything. No one did anything about it. It just let it happen.
Yeah, when I will say, when you talk about expendable, Berkowitz is like, to me, I think all of us believe every human life is valuable, but for them, I could see Berkowitz being kind of an expendable, like easy. He kind of walked into the trap by his own, as we just said earlier, your own weaknesses, your own shadow side, the things that you struggle with is what the demons will latch onto. And Berkowitz obviously had a hard time being autonomous. He desperately wanted a family. He wanted to belong. And so they used that. He walked into the trap. They didn't have to find him. He found them, and he became an expendable. It is my belief that I don't think any of the hierarchy people would ever be the ones out there doing the out there shooting people. Like they're the ones in the background, right? They're the ones in the background.
Well, there were people pulling the strings that were never going to get down in the dirt and pull the triggers. But again, I've said this on many shows, even with you, Brice, is the idea was that they needed to create fear. They needed to stoke this paranoia and fear in the city, because that creates power within the covens.
Yeah.
Okay. And you create this power based on that fear. And of course, New York City was paralyzed. There was these random shootings going on that made no sense. People were getting shot. People were getting killed. Young people. Okay. So it was like crazy, and they couldn't stop it. They couldn't stop it. Even the shooters thumbed their nose at the police. They had, for the year anniversary at the end of July of 77, the year anniversary of the first shooting, all the shootings happened in either the Bronx or Queens at that point. Okay. So the cops had dragnets all over like the bridges coming from the Bronx into Queens. Okay. They were looking on all the main thoroughfares. There were checkpoints. They were looking, because they said this guy is going to hit on the year anniversary. Guess what? He didn't do that. Okay. He didn't hit. Instead, he waited a few more days into August and then killed somebody in Brooklyn. Okay. Shot 2 people. One of them would die. Stacy Moskowitz in Brooklyn. And they weren't even looking in Brooklyn. So he was toying with these people, with the law enforcement. Okay. And when I say he, because it's out of convenience. I mean, even that particular shooting in Brooklyn, I don't believe was done by Berkowitz. He was there, but
And Stacy, she didn't fit the mold. She was blonde, and at that point,
yes, that's right. He was going after brunettes at that point. And all right, so that's a good point, Brice. My mother had dyed her hair light. Okay, she frosted her hair to get away from that dark hair, because he was going after. And then what does he do? He gets this bleach blonde girl. Yeah.
That to me almost feels like it was some type of initiation, because when sometimes, I don't know, I mean, it must be the same in America over here, and these youngsters start joining gangs and stuff, they've got to shoot someone to become a member or something like that. That to me almost, felt like it was that sort of setup with that particular murder, where it was clearly not.
I think it could be. At least the early ones might have been. Okay.
Yeah.
Again, Berkowitz has claimed he's changed his story several times over the years. When he got arrested, he admitted to all the murders. Okay. Over time, he would change that to, I only did the ones in the Bronx. Recently, he is mentioned in a book by Mike Caparelli called Monster Mirror, and he again copped to all of them. Okay, and then now I'm thinking he may flip again. So, and a lot of that, I don't really understand it, other than he's just still a flawed person that can't admit maybe what he's done. It's possible.
Is it possible he's being paid off from someone to stay, right, to take the fall, basically, and promise, because he wants to stay in jail by all accounts.
Well, in the beginning, he explained how, yes, there was a cult. I was in a cult, and they made me tell them where my parents are and pictures of my parents. Yeah. So he was blackmailed in a sense to keep quiet, which I do believe that.
Yeah, okay? I do too.
But now it's 47 years later. Okay, his father's dead, and there's no other family for him. I wish he would talk, a little more. But he's also a changed person. Like, he doesn't consider this, he realizes what he did, and he doesn't expect to ever get out of jail. I mean, I don't think that's going to happen.
Mike, what's just dawned on me, and it's been triggered by a comment that also, how many of these alleged shooters are MK Ultra tards? Okay, that immediately. Now I know we did kind of talk about that earlier on, so there's no real information there, but or real concrete evidence there that did happen. But what I'm knowing more and more now, when I speak to people like Jerry Marzinski, and again, you speak to the guys that have been in the arcane, prisons and psych wards are the two most common places where mind control takes place.
Well, hospitals, particular hospitals are used by the CIA. For instance, John Hinckley Jr., who shot Reagan, okay, he was in a psychiatric hospital in Washington, D.C. prior to the shooting of Reagan, okay, that was known as a hospital where they did MK Ultra, okay. When you talk about, that's a whole other, I've done shows on this, that's a whole other thing, okay, because there's a connection with the Bushes, there's a whole thing with that, okay. And
right.
I'll just, if people want to dig deep, okay, John Hinckley Jr. shot Reagan, okay, when he left that hotel in March of '81. On the same day, the Bush family was supposed to meet with the Hinckley family for lunch. They knew each other back in Texas. They were old oil company buddies, okay? The Hinckley's were in the oil business, and so was Bush, okay? When I say Bush, I mean George H.W. Bush and his older family, okay? Not George W., George H.W., the old man, okay? And he would be Reagan's VP, all right? This guy was straight up CIA, he goes back to the JFK assassination, George H.W. Bush, there's a whole bunch of stuff there. But anyway, when it comes to Berkowitz, there isn't a lot of information as far as MK Ultra. The only thing that you could maybe attach to it is when he was in the Army, okay, he ended up being in Korea, but then would be stationed back in the South, okay, I believe in Kentucky, if I remember right. And he was in a hospital there that was known for MK Ultra. That's all I know.
I want to bring up something.
Well, we need to know. That's all we need to know. And now we see the results thereof.
So Kimberly asked if he was really in jail because of the whole Epstein thing. Yes, Berkowitz is really in jail. He's not being hidden. He's not
he's
in jail.
I'm very good friends with Carl Denaro, who was part of the second shooting in Flushing, Queens. He was shot in the head, okay, and survived. I'm very good friends with him. He still has a metal plate in the back of his head from that shooting. He's had a great life after that, thank God. But he visited Berkowitz twice in the last couple of years in prison.
He's really in jail. Now, the difference between Berkowitz and Epstein, so we have to think about the differences between these guys. Totally different. Epstein, I would consider to be more closer to the hierarchy than Berkowitz is expendable. So that's what we can't paint everyone with the same paint, right? Like we have to be more complex. There's complexity here.
Epstein was tapped into, the big players. World.
Yeah, he was there. I mean, Epstein was the, what do you call it? Supplier.
Right.
Whatever they wanted.
All has to do with, this all has to go back to sex magic. Okay. Yeah. All right. When Crowley believed, okay, if you had sex with a child, that created incredible power for you. Okay. And there's different sects within people that believe Crowley and other stuff. And they pedophilia is something that is part of that. Okay. So yeah, Epstein was the supplier for these people. Berkowitz was a low man on the totem pole. Okay. Could you say he was expendable? Well, he's the one that went down.
Yeah.
Okay. For
just like Epstein, but on another level. He was just fell a little bit like. And Epstein, by the way, I want to just say, Epstein's venue, Epstein Island, was actually the venue of choice. So he was their venue. Of course, he was involved, and I do believe, if memory serves me, And he's a ninth circle Satanist, Epstein. He's involved with the ninth circle.
There's stories about that. Yeah, I'm not sure if that's totally true, but there's something to it. Look, I mean, what's that little temple on the island? What is that?
Yeah,
of course. That,
right.
You know, he's involved. So, I mean, to get involved with those guys on that level, he would have had to have made some sacrifices, put it that way.
Berkowitz was doing crap in a park. You know, he had a job as like a postman. Like, he was not the same level. Epstein the reason why they had to get rid of Epstein was because Epstein could take them all down.
Yeah, exactly.
Berkowitz could probably take people down, but the minute Berkowitz went out of jail, he himself would be taken down. These are two totally different.
But it's on another level, you know. You're talking hierarchy. Yeah, this is on another level,
totally different level. I mean, Berkowitz was afraid to talk because of what happened to his family. Okay, back in '77, he was afraid to talk for that reason. You know, he didn't really even start talking about a cult until he connected with Maury Terry.
Yeah.
Wow. Sure. Wow. How interesting.
Yeah.
And slowly but surely we shall start revealing the truth, drop by drop.
It's complicated. You think you know something,
Whoa.
and another information, and your mind completely changes again. And I just have to say, you guys, remember, the darkness can't create anything, only the light can. And so what they take, they invert. And so that means the light holds the power, right? And so, you know, it's and we have to like we have to be able to have critical thinking skills, right? And look at the complexities of everything that's presented to us, and not judge it so quickly, but be able to like look at the whole big picture.
Absolutely. It's so true. And I just want to Virgin. Not sure how to virgin. I would pronounce that virgin, but I don't think that is probably the right pronunciation. Talking about, just on a side note here as well, Branson's Island is worse than Epstein's Kids in Cages Outside. And it's true, because I remember speaking to, I remember some of the earlier whistleblowers, and I don't remember who, and I'm going back like 4 years now, saying that there's Epstein Island, and then there's an island that belongs to Joe Biden, and then Branson as well. And the kids get trafficked in the submarines, of course, because Epstein's, what was his woman's name again?
Ghislaine Maxwell.
Ghislaine Maxwell. Yeah, they had a little submarine. That's true.
Yeah, so that's how they would transport. And of course, on an island, the kids can run nowhere, right? There's no way out.
Well, he preyed on runaway people, runaway girls, okay, or boys too, runaways that had nowhere to go. He would give them a place to live, clothes, food, give them that life. But in return, they had to service the powers that be. It's disgusting.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, I'm just grateful to.
Somebody said Biden owns Gilligan's Island. That's funny. Okay, that's funny.
Yeah, I think Biden is. I think Biden has probably left more than a decade ago, in my opinion. But who knows?
Yeah, he's shot.
Whoever this actor is doing a damn fine job.
Somebody posted like an American. Who's our president right now? Like,
I don't know who's in charge. He was on the beach for like 2 weeks, it seemed. And I saw a video of him. Somebody was filming it from behind. Okay, so you see him from behind. He's under the umbrella, like anybody on the beach, and he's got like a bag. And I see him going in the bag to get something to drink, like a bottle of something. Okay, and he just did it so slow. It was like an old person just does something so slow, and I'm going like, who the hell is in charge of the country now, man? This guy is shot, totally shot.
But from what we're hearing, it's always been Mr. Pindar. Not the. He's not the Pindar. What's his name? Obama. Obama's been running the country.
Well, yeah, that's been since the beginning. Okay, with this is just Obama's third term. But look, the thing is, there's so many people awake now that it's all watched. Okay, and everything they're doing is like in everybody's face. here's a perfect example, and I won't go on and on about it, but Dick Cheney yesterday, the guy who, orchestrated, was the architect of the problems we have in the Middle East, okay, for the last 20 years, all right? He just endorsed Kamala Harris and said, I will be voting for her because Trump is a danger to democracy and a danger to America and all that. Well, no, you're voting for Kamala because Trump destroyed your daughter's political career, okay, and you're angry, okay? And also, you are a member of the unit party. And what makes me laugh is during the Bush presidency, the 8 years, I have to admit, I was fooled by a lot of things, okay? I was for the Iraq war in the beginning, okay? I admit it, okay? He had the whole country fooled, okay? But in those times, the left hated Dick Cheney, like they would have put a bullet in his head if they could, okay? Now, because yesterday he endorsed Kamala, when you look at the left, what they've been saying for the last 24 hours, they're in love with Dick Cheney. It's like they forgot everything that they stood for. It's just such Trump derangement syndrome or whatever you want to call it, okay? And but Kamala also said she was honored to have his endorsement. The guy was
all
like,
work together. It's all part of this whole big conspiracy.
It's all a uniparty. They're warmongers, And if you want to see a good comment on it, check out what Tulsi Gabbard said yesterday about it. I think it was great what she said.
It's getting interesting. I mean, we might be seeing more of this like witch war shenanigans in the United States.
I think the witch wars. They're not playing in New York streets now. They're playing in the political arena, and they're playing all over. We're going to see more and more. Anyway, wow. Guys, thank you so much. And I want to just say thank you so much for joining me. Everybody in the chat, nice to see you all here. Thank you, Brice. Thank you, Mike. Is there anything you want to just say off in closing, Mike?
Well, keep watching on Gnostic TV for the free shows that we're putting out soon.
Yeah.
Okay, we're making a lot of headway in this new shooting that was attached to the Son of Sam case. It was a shooting of a woman named Wendy Savino in April of '76 that the NYPD is now saying was done by Berkowitz. It was not done by Berkowitz. I talk about all that and why that is. There's a lot of evidence. Berkowitz himself has commented on this. It's a great, I was hoping to get away from the topic for a while, but I got sucked back into it because of this part of it. And I care about the case. I care about the truth. And I don't like that there's something here done to the case that's not true. And the NYPD is not even investigating. They're just taking the words of a loser podcaster that brought this all to them.
Look forward to seeing that then. Brice, anything
we know
from
who that
you?
Is, right? You know who I'm talking about, right?
Yeah. And I just want to say, you guys have been watching the chat. Just because someone doesn't agree with you on something, well, let's not like rebuke them in the name of God. That's using God. That's using God's name in vain. Just because someone doesn't agree with you doesn't mean they're a bad person. I'm seeing that kind of happening in the chat right now. And censorship is something we don't like. And so we need to be open to hearing opposing views. And if someone doesn't agree with your opinion, then that doesn't mean that you go and rebuke them, right? It's just an opinion. And opinions are like assholes. Everyone's got one and they all stink. So, so let's just be kind to each other. And if someone doesn't agree with us, that's no big deal. I mean, I don't know anybody who agrees with everything I believe. And I don't agree with everything everybody else agrees, but we can learn from each other, right? So let's just not use God's name in vain to try to like hurt other people because they don't believe us or they have a different opinion. Okay. Let's be the side where we're fair and we listen and we even if we differ, we still respect each other. So
to quote Rodney King, can't we all just get along?
Right. Yeah. Discussing opinions is how we grow. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Don't be showing no hate in the chats now.
Yeah.
Okay, everybody. Thank you so much. I appreciate you all. And I just, part of the joy of having a diverse channel is that we have many different people from many walks of life. And I appreciate each and every one of you. So thank you so much for joining us. I will see you. I'm not sure when. I think Wednesday. I don't think tomorrow, but I shall see you on Wednesday. Double dose, Jesse and Brice again. Yay. Mike, thank you so much for joining me. And I look forward to seeing you soon again. We'll have you back.
Definitely.
God bless you, everyone. Take good care. Bye now. Mwah.